Oh, thanks very much, David. I've sort of been telling people that I feel like Kieran Reid when Richie McCaw stepped down from the All Blacks. But that makes David Steve Hansen, though, which is sort of when you think about it. Because Simon and I, we'd known each other for over 25 years. In fact, we went to university together. And he's been a friend of mine for that time, and also an amazing leader of the company, and I think all shareholders would share that sentiment as well. So it was a really bittersweet moment for me, the news over a few months ago, having worked for Simon for so long. But actually, the way I look at it, it's just really a massive honour, and it's very humbling for me to have the opportunity to work with our staff and shareholders, our shareholders, in a different way. I don't see my promotion as a moment to celebrate. I see it as a moment to just get my head down and work hard and just pick up the baton from Simon and do a good job. As part of my change, I'm really happy though that Dave Bennett will become the new CFO. This is Dave here beside me. I've worked very closely with Dave for the last 4 years, and he's been a really outstanding financial controller, working really closely with and gaining the respect of the senior management team and actually all of the people in the business that work with him. Dave might want to stand up actually so people can see you. He's very tall. He's bigger than me. So, okay, right, yeah. So I used to be good looking like Dave, with dark hair and that sort of thing. I told him he might not look too good in 10 years' time, but we haven't told his wife that. So Dave's a great guy. He's got the industry in his blood. His mother, Sue, has actually brokered the sale of more aged care facilities in New Zealand than any other person. So the aged care industry has been in the sort of Bennett family blood for a long time. And so when Dave joined us 4 years ago, he was able to hit the ground running straight away and has a really strong interest in what we do. So it's just great. You'll do a great job, Dave. So I'd like to talk this morning about how important it is to me to honour the incredible legacy we have here at Ryman. Share a little bit about me, outline how I see our future prospects. So the All Blacks talk about that incredible legacy that they feel when they pull on the black jersey. They don't just want to be an All Black, they want to be a great one. And they want to honour that All Black legacy. And I see it exactly the same way. At Ryman we have a very, very special culture, 30 years in the making, and it's my job, and it's also the job of the leaders of Ryman to keep it that way. So Kevin Hickman, who's sitting down the end there, our co-founder, he had a great core belief that I think really defines what we do. And it's just as simple as this. It's got to be good enough for Mum. And I think that we all understand the power of what that means. Mums have high standards, we want them to be treated the best. And Kevin sets the standard in everything that we do. And Simon also added to this core belief in a fundamental way by promoting a culture of kindness, recognising kindness amongst our staff and also in how we care and serve our residents. So I think of those two things. It's got to be good enough for Mum and kindness, which are two great core beliefs, I think, which I certainly intend to honour and preserve and build upon. I thought I might just say a little bit about me, because you might be thinking, oh no, the accountant's taken over. So although I've worked for the company for over 10 years, my association with Ryman actually goes back over 20 years, because my nana was a resident in one of the early Ryman villages, Margaret Stoddard in Christchurch, just off Riccarton Road, from 1995. Mum and Dad were very impressed with how the staff cared for my nana, and so were my brother and I. Nana started life in the village in a townhouse, and she transitioned to the rest home towards the end of her 7 years there. So I would stay with her when I returned from time to time from the UK, and I used to love getting the remainder of her roast meal and my roast meal for lunch, meeting her friends in the village, and when the gardeners weren't watching, she would instruct me to move rose bushes around in her front garden, which I now understand is a big no-no, but she told me it was fine. But my dad really felt that Ryman would be a company that would really go places. So when the opportunity came up in 2006 to apply for the role of CFO, I was attracted not only to the potential of Ryman, because you could just see decades of growth and success ahead of the company, but I was also keen to be part of a company and a group of people that did good things for people. For me, I haven't had the pleasure of seeing my parents grow old because, like quite a few of you, both passed away too young, and especially my mum. And I think it is because of that and the experience of my nana at Margaret Stoddard that I feel a great sense of personal responsibility to make those later years for other people's mums and dads, their grandparents, the very best. The other big part of my life is my wife Barbara. And Barbara, she can stand up, embarrassingly for her, and wave to the audience. We're sort of a family business at Ryman, you know, we're not a big corporate. So we celebrated 20 years of marriage this year. Barbara's from Scotland, she's a GP. She practices in Christchurch, and I think her patients would say that she's a great one. She goes the extra mile for people and never watches the clock. She even has a few patients in our Christchurch villages, so I get her take on how we're doing sometimes when she comes home. And she's quite a demanding shareholder too, actually. So between my nana, helping mum and dad through their illnesses, and Barbara's medical training, I have a great passion for what we do. I believe strongly that caring for people is the single most important thing you can do in life. And so to work for Ryman for me is the perfect balance of working with people that do good and also being driven to succeed against any adversity, being part of something successful. So looking forward, what does the future hold? I think that this really is the single most exciting time in the history of the company. And I'll start with why that is. We're at the cusp of the most significant change in demographics ever. Someone turning 80, which is just above the average age of entry for independent living, was born in 1937. 1937 was the first time since the Great Depression that the birth rate increased in New Zealand and Australia, and this lift continued for decades. In fact, I think right up until the year that I was born, which is 1970. So you can see that band there in the graph, the bit that's shaded, that's a sort of flat declining period during the Depression years, post-Depression years. And then immediately to the right of that shaded band, you can see the graph just lifts dramatically, and it goes for a very, very long time. It's a total step function change in the birth rate of this country and also Australia's. So the world has actually never seen an ageing of its populations. The United Nations did a research report into it and described it in words that really struck me when I read the first page. They described it as unprecedented and unparalleled in human history. And we've spent 30 years at Ryman getting ready for this moment, and it's just about to hit. So growth for us is actually just getting started. Secondly, we're going to take Melbourne by storm. Apologies for the sort of rugby joke there. I just couldn't help it. We're targeting to have 5 villages open by 2020, and from there we'll be on a roll. Tom Brownrigg, the Group Construction Manager, is busy working with his teams to plan a doubling of our ongoing rollout rate to 4 villages per annum, 2 in Melbourne and 2 in New Zealand. I was in Melbourne last week with Debbie McClure, our Group Sales and Community Relations Manager, for our first Brandon Park public meetings. And you can see from that photo there, that's me sort of standing in the corner. We packed out the Glen Waverley Bowling Club in the afternoon with potential new residents and had strong attendance again in the evening. What's really apparent when you speak with folk is that we're seen as very different. We all had a great chance, didn't we, Deb, to speak to people after the meetings. And there's a couple of key things that sets us apart in that market. Firstly, our Ryman Peace of Mind guarantees, and secondly, our care. So our terms are seen as resident-friendly and fair. We offer fixed fees for life when most others increase their weekly fees every year. Our deferred management fee is capped at 20% for someone's life in the village, and many others are at up to 40%. And they charge that 40% on the next price that the next resident pays, not on the price that the original resident has paid, so it's even higher. We don't charge refurbishment charges when you exit, but it's very common practice in Australia for refurbishment costs to be paid to benefit the next resident, We charge no selling or administration costs, and again, it's commonplace to see that in the sector. And also, our contracts are written in plain English. Many contracts you see over there are over 128 pages long. But it's not just our terms that attract people. Our Ryman-style villages, which are well-staffed and which offer a full range of care so that you know that we can look after you for the rest of your days, is very unique in the Melbourne market. Most other villages offer very little by the way of aged care. And when I met with our residents at our Weary Dunlop village last Thursday morning for morning tea, many of them reiterated to me just how important that aspect was to them, because for a number of the spouses, their other half was actually in the care centre, so they were able to see them each day and not be split apart by having to go to a different care centre that's in some other location. So without any marketing until last week's public meeting, we've actually already sold over 44 contracts for Brandon Park just by going to our database alone. And these are for apartments which open about sort of mid-year, mid-calendar year next year, and that's a value of over $40 million. So we might just we played this at the year-end result, but some of you might not have seen it. It's just a couple of minute clip of what Brandon Park looks like, because I think it's really important. You know, one of our messages today is that we're really restarting off our rollout in Melbourne, and this is a fantastic village we're going to be building here. And what's interesting about that video is that that is all produced in-house by our visual design people within the design team. So they're pretty clever, aren't they? They're sort of almost like sort of gaming videos. They look fantastic. The construction team are rearing to go, and earthworks started last week. It was great to see the diggers and the trucks on site getting underway, and the project office, which I had a look around with Marty, Travis and Connell, is well established and looks great, and those guys are chafing at the bit. Our development team, led by Andrew Mitchell, are hard at work with local councils to get consents for Burwood East and Coburg at the moment, and also plans are well underway for Mount Eliza and also Geelong. So thirdly, if we think about New Zealand, we've got a great business here in New Zealand and fantastic sites in the land bank which are set to deliver outstanding results over the next few years. We're about to get underway at Narrowneck and Tropicana, and the sites are getting established literally as we speak. And we expect the first residents to move into their apartments later next year at both of those villages. And again, and this is the last video clip, just a wee 40-second clip of Tropicana from the year, because it is a stunning site and we haven't really showed that yet. So that's it there. So it was really one of the last sort of significant, almost farmland-like spaces in West Auckland. It's absolutely stunning site. It's going to have great views back over the harbour and also out to Rangitoto, that sort of thing. Fourthly, you might recall from the annual report that between Brandon Park, Narrowneck and Tropicana, we have 3 new villages coming on stream which, as David mentioned, will add over $1 billion to the value of our village portfolio on completion. Building at higher value locations like this means that we significantly amplify the earnings from development, resales, management fees and care, so right across the board. So for example, a 25% development margin or a 20% management fee is applied to a far higher base of, say, $200 million for a village, rather than, say, Whangarei, for example, which the capital sums we got for that were about $80 million. So just building one village in a higher value location is like building 2 to 3 villages in a smaller area. Brandon Park, for example, is like building 3 villages in regional New Zealand in terms of value. And the great thing about these higher value locations is that the residents in the area actually free up the biggest amounts of capital of anywhere. They're actually the most affordable places that we build for our residents. We typically see someone freeing up well over $300,000 when they sell their own residence in that area and move into our village. So that means that we're also well insulated to any house price declines in the market, along with the fact that we're also serving a real need in the community for care and support, because we aren't just a lifestyle choice, just like David mentioned. Fifthly, we have a lot of pent-up gains across our newer villages. It takes about 10 years, actually, for a village to reach the sort of earnings we'd expect after the first residents move in, and we've only built about half the portfolio in the last 5 years. So as you can imagine, what we've built, as we've built about half of our villages ready in about the last 5 years, it's going to take another 5 years before we reach the sort of levels of activity we'd expect to see on those villages maturing. So we will get good growth from what we've already built and paid for, and the resales bank that we talk about, which is the price-to-price gains for our existing units, is sitting at well over $700 million, and we expect to crystallise those gains over time, even if there's no house price inflation at all. Just talking about people for a moment, we're going to invest a lot more in our leadership development over the coming years, and we need to continue to build on our Ryman Leaders program, because one of the most important things we need to focus on is growing our people so that they can step up into new roles and be stretched. I love the quote that we used with Weary Dunlop, who we named our first village in Melbourne after. He had this quote which is, "I believe it is only when people are stretched that they can reach their full potential." And that really describes our culture perfectly in terms of how we like to test people. So we're going to need a lot more leaders who are outstanding and who share the Ryman culture, because we're going to double in size every 5 years. And finally, we're going to revolutionise the way that we care for our residents and provide a better working experience for staff and residents with My Ryman Care. Barbara Rain-Rose, our Group Operations Manager, is going to lead one of the most important and most significant changes in the history of the company. The next 18 months will see every village in the group go fully live as the My Ryman revolution rolls out across the country. I was at Dinah Isaac on Monday with Barb and also Victoria, who's part of the team, and we talked to carers and nurses about the difference that My Ryman's going to make in their working lives, and we also spoke to some residents who have the application in their room. And what you see is an environment of no paperwork. You have real-time information about the resident on the tablet, in the room with the resident. There's real clarity around every individual task and care required for that person on the screen and when it needs to be done. There's far better communication tools with family and between staff. And the most important thing of all is that people are getting back more time with residents, which was one of the key things we wanted to achieve. And one of the things I loved personally was when we went into Thelma's room, I was able to very intuitively bring up the My Ryman screen, read about her, a bit of background about her life, her sister, her daughter who would come and visit her, things that she liked and didn't like, And within about 45 seconds, as someone totally new to Thelma, I sort of felt that I could have a bit of a conversation with her and feel I knew her a little bit to sort of break the ice. So previously that sort of information would be in people's heads or in a paper file back at the nurses' station. So we're really bringing the sort of personalisation of things to life. And you know you're on a winner when experienced registered nurses like Barb, who are used to traditional ways of working, just totally embrace new technology with such enthusiasm. And you can see the passion that Barb's got for the project. So wrapping it all up, so we've got 5 big villages under construction. We've got 11 more coming in the pipeline. We've got a tailwind of demographics behind us like we've actually never seen before. We've got a great team of people. We've got commitment to strong innovations for residents and for staff. And also the fact that we're only now just starting our rollout, our rollout into a market which is the same size and in fact bigger than the whole of New Zealand in the form of Melbourne. So all of that means from a shareholder point of view is that I think there's a lot of very bright years to come. So thank you.